Paranaque offers a rare exception. Unlike most of Metro Manila, its flooding is not heavily driven by the wider hydrologic system of Laguna Lake, the Pasig River, or large upstream river basins. Its challenges are largely local: rainfall, drainage capacity, tidal influence, and urban design, making the problem more contained and therefore more solvable. This unique condition allows Paranaque to serve as a practical showcase, a place where flood control can be addressed independently, at lower cost, and with visible results. Solving flooding in Paranaque will not solve Metro Manila's flooding as a whole, but it can demonstrate clearly and convincingly that flooding can be solved when the problem is properly framed. A helicopter view of flooding, the technical and hydrological dimension. A warning from Jakarta when a city runs out of choices. Before examining Metro Manila, it is worth looking at Jakarta. Jakarta is no longer relocating its capital out of ambition or political choice. It is being forced to move. Decades of unchecked groundwater extraction, aggressive coastal development, and loss of natural water storage caused widespread land subsidence. Large portions of the city now sit below sea level, surviving only through constant pumping and seawalls that must never fail. Jakarta teaches a hard lesson. When hydrology is ignored long enough, engineering can only delay collapse, not reverse it. Metro Manila still has a choice. Jakarta no longer does. Flooding is a watershed problem, not a city problem. Flooding in Metro Manila is often framed as a city, provincial, or political problem. In truth, it is none of these. It is a watershed problem. Water does not recognize political boundaries. It responds only to gravity, storage, timing, and resistance. Any flood control strategy that ignores this reality is bound to fail. At the core of Metro Manila's flooding is the interaction of three powerful hydrological forces: Pampanga River, Laguna Lake, Manila Bay. These are not independent systems. They function as one connected hydraulic body. What happens in one inevitably affects the others. Where flood control cannot be separated from water supply. Flood control and water supply are often treated as separate concerns. This is a serious mistake. A true flood control solution must also secure water for the dry season. This requires allowing Laguna Lake to function again as a natural buffer, regulator, and freshwater reserve. If flood water is expelled too quickly without restoring storage, the problem is merely shifted downstream, while precious water is lost and later missed. Ondoy was not an anomaly. It was a system failure. The flooding caused by Ondoy was not a freak event. It was a system failure. Trying to solve flooding in Marikina is already too late. Flood mitigation must be addressed upstream, where water volume and timing can still be controlled. Once flood water converges in dense urban areas, solutions become costly, disruptive, and limited. Flood disasters do not occur when rain falls. They occur when systems fail to manage water before it concentrates. The effect of Manila Bay. Reclamation. Reclamation in Manila Bay is not a local coastal issue. It is a system-level hydrological intervention whose consequences extend far inland. Its effects include loss of temporary storage, reducing the bay's buffering capacity, backwater and tidal locking, slowing or reversing river discharge during high tide, risk transfer, not risk removal, increasing reliance on pumps in perfect operation. Jakarta followed this path. The result is a city that must be defended every hour of every day. What flood control is not. There are clear indicators of false solutions. Riverbank concreting is bank protection or beautification, not flood control. Cosmetic widening and lining relieve stress locally but do not cure system failure. Faster drainage often shifts flooding downstream, where damage worsens. True flood control manages where water goes, when it moves, and how much is allowed to accumulate. The hydrological implications of the Bulacan Airport. Large filled or reclaimed areas alter natural drainage paths, storage volumes, and flood timing. Even with proper compaction, displaced water must surface elsewhere. Ignoring this reality invites long-term flooding and subsidence risks. Groundwater extraction must stop. Uncontrolled groundwater extraction has already caused widespread land subsidence across Metro Manila. This must stop. At the same time, Laguna Lake must be allowed to breathe. This requires a master plan, phased reduction of fish pens and fish ponds. This is not merely technical, it is a policy choice. The interest of a few versus the survival and water security of millions. An ecological collapse of Laguna Lake is irreversible. Once lost, it cannot be engineered back. Laguna Lake is our last card. Lose it, and we go thirsty. Understanding Malabon. Geography, not neglect. The flooding of Malabon is not accidental, it is geographical. Centuries ago, settlers chose Malabon because it was the lowest natural point, ideal for boats and trade. What failed was not settlement, but our failure to adapt protection and planning as the city expanded. Will an Ondoy-type flood happen again? Yes, it can happen again. Climate science shows that warmer air holds more moisture, increasing the intensity of extreme rainfall events. Ondoy-level rainfall is no longer unthinkable. What has changed and what has not? Warnings have improved, saving lives. Some infrastructure has been upgraded, mainly for moderate floods. Urbanization has intensified runoff. Watershed degradation continues. Much of what is labeled flood control remains beautification, not system management. Can another Ondoy-level disaster be prevented? Rainfall cannot be controlled. Damage can be. Prevention depends on watershed level management, upstream retention and detention, intelligent forecast-based dam operation, integrated river-lake bay management. Flood control is not just concrete. It is timing, judgment, and coordination. Conclusion. Ondoy can happen again. Metro Manila is vulnerable, but not helpless. If flood control is approached at the watershed level, guided by science, foresight, and integrated management, an Ondoy-scale storm would cause severe flooding, but not a national disaster. Water is not the enemy. Mismanagement is. And that choice is made long before the rain falls. Epilogue. One system, two solutions. Flood control and assured water supply. For decades, flooding and water shortage have been treated as separate problems, managed by different agencies, funded through different budgets, and explained through different excuses. Yet they arise from the same source, how we manage water. Floods occur when excess water is released without control. Shortages occur when that same water is wasted and allowed to escape. This is where a properly automated Napindan hydraulic control structure changes everything. Originally built mainly to prevent saltwater intrusion into Laguna Lake, Napindan occupies a critical junction between the lake and the Pasig River. When managed correctly, it does far more than protect Metro Manila from floods. It safeguards fresh water for millions. What the Napindan hydraulic lock enables. Once modernized and automated, Napindan allows us to control flood discharge instead of blindly dumping water into Manila Bay, prevent saltwater intrusion, protecting Laguna Lake as a freshwater reservoir, retain fresh water longer, especially during dry months, stabilize lake levels, reducing flooding in lakeshore communities, support water supply augmentation for Metro Manila and nearby provinces. In simple terms, it transforms Laguna Lake from a flooding liability into a national water security asset. One intervention, two lifelines, with proper timing and automation. During heavy rains, excess water is released safely. During dry periods, fresh water is retained. Pressure on dams, deep wells, and groundwater extraction is reduced. Urban water distribution becomes more reliable and predictable. This is not futuristic thinking. It is basic system engineering, and it is the shift we must make. The old question was, how fast can we drain floodwater? The better question is, how much water can we safely keep? Modern flood strategy no longer means pushing water away at all costs. It means managing, timing, storing, and protecting it. The Napindan hydraulic lock is not merely a floodgate. It is a valve for national water security. The real lesson. When flood control is designed as part of water supply planning, every peso works twice. Once to protect lives and property, once to secure water for the future. Flooding and water scarcity are not enemies. They are two sides of the same problem. And when we solve them together, with systems like Napindan working as they should, we do more than survive the next storm. We secure the next generation. When engineering meets moral choice, but no lock, no matter how advanced, can save a lake that is slowly being strangled. Fish pens restrict circulation, trap pollutants, concentrate waste, and degrade the freshwater quality that Napindan is meant to protect. As the lake loses its ability to cleanse itself, the promise of reliable water supply fades. This brings us to an unavoidable equation. On one side are millions of people, now and in the future, who depend on Laguna Lake for drinking water, flood moderation, and ecological balance. Entire urban regions, generations yet to come. On the other side are a relatively small number of fishermen whose livelihoods rely on structures that increasingly compromise the lake's capacity to serve the greater population. This is no longer a technical debate. It is a moral decision. When a shared resource becomes essential to public survival, private use must yield to the common good. This principle has guided floodway clearing, road widening, watershed protection, and public reservoir management for decades. Water, life itself, cannot be the exception. This does not mean neglect. It means transition with dignity. Fish pens should not disappear overnight, but neither can they remain indefinitely. What is required is a clear, humane, and time-bound phase-out, supported by livelihood assistance, retraining, and alternative opportunities. Compassion must be real, but direction must be firm. Because once fresh water is lost, no compensation can replace it. Once a lake turns saline or polluted, no program can reverse time. True leadership chooses the future over convenience. And when the choice stands between millions needing water to live and a few needing water to earn, the lines are clear. Life comes first. 1 meter of Laguna Lake water can supply Metro Manila for months, yet we flush it to the sea in a few stormy nights and call it flood control. About the author. The author is a civil engineer by training, with a professional life shaped by water, movement, and systems thinking. His first job involved the transport of oil, from Manila Bay to the Pandacan terminals, and later as far as Palila inside Laguna Lake, including bunkering of ships in Manila Bay and fishing boats in Malabon and Navotas. Over the years, he crossed the lake hundreds of times, learning firsthand how lake levels, tides, weather, and river connections affect movement, timing, and risk. Hydrology was one of his favorite subjects in engineering school, and that academic foundation gave structure and language to what he encountered daily in practice. When the Laguna Lake Development Authority, LLDA, was first being organized around 1968, he was a young engineer in the private sector involved in feeding operational data into the system, data drawn from actual lake and river barging operations. These included observations on lake behavior, river conditions, siltation, and navigational constraints. The inputs were practical in nature, shaped by work where water dictated feasibility. Later in his career, as a corporate planner for a large company, his thinking was shaped by a powerful reference point: the recurring floods in Bangladesh, many of which occurred even when there was little or no rainfall in the flooded areas themselves. There, communities are often inundated not because it is raining over them, but because enormous volumes of water are released from distant upstream watersheds in the Himalayas, sometimes days or weeks earlier, and carried downstream by rivers that cross borders and regions. That experience reinforced a fundamental lesson: that flooding cannot be understood or solved at the point where damage occurs. It must be traced back to its source. This upstream, systems-based perspective influenced how he approached planning and operations. It shaped his conviction that water problems are rarely local failures. They are usually the result of fragmented thinking applied to an interconnected system. As general manager of an oil refinery located by the Laguna Lake, he oversaw the movement of large volumes of fuel used for power generation, relying heavily on the lake as a transport corridor. His work extended to the Pampanga River, supplying a depot in Pampanga through river transport and coordinated trucking. River depth, flow, siltation, and timing were constant operational considerations. His familiarity with control points such as Napindan came not from theory, but from experience. Severe siltation repeatedly turned it into a transport bottleneck, forcing close attention to water levels, flow behavior, and operational limits, lessons that later proved equally relevant to flood management. Flooding is not theoretical for the author. He has personally lost 2 vehicles to floodwaters, one on a sunny day. He and his wife also narrowly escaped a landslide, an experience that left a lasting awareness of how quickly water-related failures can threaten life itself. Through decades of experience familiarity with the terrain, the author came to understand water not as an enemy to be controlled, but as a system to be understood and managed, where rainfall, rivers, lakes, tides, land use, and human decisions are inseparably linked. This book is written not from recent access or secondhand reports, but from long familiarity and reflection, informed by having worked within the system while it was still taking shape. The author also spent years as an expatriate of a European oil major with business interest in Rio de Janeiro, where he was involved in oil distribution and terminal design, covering systems terminating through modern rail transport. Serving as design manager, he worked on the practical integration of infrastructure, logistics, and movement, experience that further deepened his understanding of how large systems succeed or fail, depending on upstream design decisions. Toward the latter part of his career, he played a key role in forming partnerships between European firms and local entities for oil and gas storage and distribution. These collaborations required alignment of technical standards, operational realities, and long-term objectives. He was directly involved in making these partnerships possible and functional, translating plans into working systems on the ground. Today, at the age of 80, the author chose to write in the interest of the social doctrine for the greater good, sharing a lifetime of first-hand experience with these problems freely, expecting nothing in return, and convinced that without a change in thinking, the future will merely repeat the past.